Hello and welcome to the Midnight Bible Study. How a Protestant professor became a Catholic. That's the topic of tonight's Bible study. I'm going to just talk about my testimony about how I went from being essentially a lost Protestant, not going to church anymore, and how I ended up becoming a Catholic. My family comes from a long line. Literally, my family line goes back to the Quakers who came across, to escape persecution in England, not long after the Pilgrims. And by the time I was born, my family were Episcopalians. So I was baptized as an Episcopalian as a baby. I actually remember it, even though I was just a baby. I don't remember much, but I do remember that moment. It was something special about it. But then as we got older, we went to church for a number of years, but then we stopped going when we moved to the farm and spent our weekends, working on the farm. And so we weren't going to church, and I kind of fell away from it, out of sight, out of mind, that sort of situation where by the time I was in junior high and high school, those religion wasn't even really in my mind. My grandmother said, when you die, you go to heaven, and that's all I really knew about it anymore. I thought that's all there was to it. And so, I was in a little later after high school. I was living in Hawaii, literally living in Waikiki, and a girl at where I was working, convinced me to go to this meeting, and I said, "Oh, sure." She told me something. She was kind of vague about it, but she thought it would help me, with my motivation or something like that, inspiration. I was in sales, and so. I go to this thing, and it turned. I go into this house, and everybody's chanting, and they were chanting Buddhist hymns of some sort. For me, it was a totally exotic experience. I didn't know what was going on, and they had me say something or other. Next thing they said, "Oh, now you're a Buddhist," and I'm going, "Really? I didn't even realize I was being considered for this." So they sent me home with like this Buddhist temple that I was supposed to worship. And the next day, I did what they told me. I started to chant to this temple like they told me. And keep in mind, at this point, I had been out of the church for many years, hadn't been at all spiritual or anything, other than praying in the woods occasionally. And so here I am in Hawaii, praying to this temple, and all of a sudden, I believe it was the Holy Spirit came over me, and I heard a voice tell me that this is evil and it's against God. And it was so clear to me, and I don't think anything like this had ever happened to me before, because it just hadn't. And so it was so clear to me that I took this temple and I smashed it all over the place, which was, they told me that anyway, so I smashed this thing into a number of pieces and I threw it away. And that was the end of that. Didn't mean I went back to church or anything, but, that's what I did. And then later on, I was in another person at a different place where I was working. It was funny. Once again, it was sort of I was sort of like, they kind of were talking to me. They said, Jesus is knocking at your door. Are you going to answer? And I'm like, of course I'm going to answer Jesus, because I considered myself a Christian. I had read The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale, and I was for it, right? I thought I was a Christian. I mean, and I was, but I don't know maybe I was a sort of I don't know, the kind of Christian who doesn't go to church. So anyway, they said, so then he says, all right, well, say this prayer with me. And so I said the prayer, and he goes, all right, you're now a reborn Christian, because I had just said the sinner's prayer. And I was kind of offended by this, because I thought, wait a minute, what are you telling me? I'm already a Christian. I didn't, but, I accepted it. And so next, he goes, all right, now, go to church with me. So I was going to church with him and his wife and his daughter, and it was wonderful. Then I actually went to the church with them, and then I was literally, they had an altar call, and I went up again. I felt called to go up again, and I was reborn again. And he was going, well, what are you doing? You were already reborn last week. So anyway, at that point, I was a Christian. I was going to church, and it was a Word of Faith type Christian church, and I was going to Christian church, and I did that for a while, and then I ended up missing. I'm moving to Texas. Now down there, I joined another Word of Faith church, and this was a super charismatic preacher. He was a good guy, but he was very charismatic, very eloquent, very motivational, and that's what I really liked about him because I was in business, so I liked the motivational aspect of it, and essentially I kind of was going there for motivation. I don't know, I mean, I was praying and fasting and all that, but I was attached to that motivation, but it kind of got warring. It kind of wore me out because it's all in the Protestant, in the Word of Faith churches where I went. It was all about the sermon. That would seem to be the highlight of the whole thing. And it would be like this week it was a 10-point plan to change your life, and then the next week it was a 7-point step plan to change your life, and then the next week it was a 5-point plan and a new way to change your life. And after 7 or 8 weeks, it's like, wait a minute, I'm still trying to implement the first plan, and you've given me 6 more. So it became really overwhelming, and I got a little frustrated. And then they had this giveaway where they said basically they really promoted the giving faith seed, the seed faith mentality where give and receive tenfold back and all that. And they in fact he went to Oral Roberts University. So anyway, he had this one day, he had this beautiful crystal eagle, and he said, all right, anyone who gives $1,000 to the church is going to get this eagle, this crystal eagle, as a reward. Like you're an eagle of a Christian. I don't know, to me it seemed like kind of like you were trying to buy status by getting that eagle. Plus I really wanted the eagle, to be honest with you, but I didn't have the $1,000. So anyway, I moved to Korea, and over in Korea I was teaching English because at this point I was trying to live by the Bible. The Bible said, use your talents, and whoever, if you hide in fear from your talents, then you'll be cast out in the utter darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of the teeth. You wicked servant, one of the parables. And so literally I changed my life because of this. I was really passionate about writing. I became a writer, a fiction writer. That's what I had my passion. I was just literally doing what it said. It said, don't live by fear. And so I did this, probably a crazy decision, but I did it, and moved to Korea to teach English because that was a way I could make a living while I'm writing. And so I'm going to a church over there, and it was a great, I don't know what, it was some Christian church, and the English, it was a huge church, but they had a separate church which was in English, and they had the Department of Defense teachers were teaching that in English, as well as some other Koreans. And so that was great. These were wonderful people. I loved it. It was a great church. That was a great experience. So then I come back to the United States, and at this point I'm like, okay, another city. Now I got to find another church. And I was sort of, then I decided, okay, I'm going back to graduate school. So I'm going to graduate school, and wow, this, I had been, trying to live out my faith by preaching in nursing homes, that kind of thing. And then I went to graduate school, and it's so overwhelming getting a master's in English, so much reading, and literally I stopped going to church because I was exhausted. I mean, it's just a massive amount of reading, and sort of drifted away from church at that point completely. And that went on for several years, and so I have no church, and then I have. We have daughters. We have a couple daughters, and I tell my wife's like, well, what are we going to do? I said, all right, well, there's that Catholic church down the street. You used to be Catholic, so why don't you just take them down to that one? It didn't mean anything to me. To me, a Catholic church, Protestant, I thought they were all, Christian church is a Christian church. I didn't have a deep understanding of the differences at that point. And it sounded like a good idea. So she goes, all right, sure, why not? So she takes him down there, and I'd say for a few years she was taking him, and like they were really thriving in this environment. They were doing really well. They were in the choir, and they were becoming really talented musicians. My daughter became the pianist for the church, and my other daughter made rosaries. One thing she did that was actually impactful for me. She made these rosaries, and I would hear about them praying the rosary, and this was a new concept to me, and I was like, whoa, well, that's kind of awesome. So I got curious about the rosary. Plus, I had a book on the rosary that I had picked up, which was really I hadn't read it yet, but it really had my interest. So at this point, I'm interested in the Catholic Church, but whenever I'd go, it's like, yeah, you're not supposed to take the Eucharist, and I'm like, wait a minute, I thought I'm a Christian. I used to do it in the other church, and but no, this is different. You have to be a Catholic, and so. So anyway, I was kind of thinking about it, and one thing I guess I forgot to mention was I was literally, when I first came back from Korea, I was literally thinking of becoming either a pastor or a professor, a writing professor. I was seriously thinking about becoming a Protestant pastor, and I called up a number of Protestant pastors, and I just asked them, hey, what's a day in the life? What's it like a day in the life of your Protestant pastor? I did this. I took diligent notes from all these conversations, so I had a sense of what it was like and what the expectations were. And I did the same thing with English professors, and ultimately I decided, I was a writer, like that's my calling, and I decided, you know what, I felt like I couldn't give 100% kind of commitment that to be a pastor. I could just picture myself in my church, like writing novels, and I thought that's not right. So that's why I said, no, I can't do that. It wouldn't be the right thing. So that's how I ended up choosing to be a professor, going that route. So anyway, I'm interested in the Catholic Church. My daughters are going, and I go, but I'm kind of feeling a little uncomfortable. I had been sort of brainwashed as a Protestant in the Word of Faith churches. Like some of them are flat out. I mean, to be honest, I don't know whether these Protestant pastors, some of the really popular ones, are highly hostile to Catholics. They flat out tell lies. Now, when I say lies, they may not know any better. They may have heard these things themselves, and they never followed up to do the research. They just believe everything they're told. They pass it on, and everybody believes them. But they clearly don't know the first. If they think they're telling the truth, they don't know anything about the Catholic Church, because these Protestant pastors go around saying things that simply show they haven't done any research. And so they're just kind of stirring up hype and creating a lot of animosity. And so I had a lot of that kind of brainwashing. And so there was a few things, that, like Catholics do things a little different. And objections that come up, like, why are people praying together in the Mass, and, why do we bow when we come into the church? Things like this that I was uncomfortable with, and they're just different from what I was used to. And so what happened was that to become you don't just to become a Protestant. I said the sinner's prayer, and that was it. Bam, you're in. Literally took about 30 seconds. It's not like that to join the Catholic Church. You have to really kind of be part of the team. You go through what's called RCIA. It was I went through it. It was you go every week, and you meet with a group of people, and there's a deacon there, and we cover some material and learn all about the faith, and all about these objections that come up that most Protestants have and have heard, and the disinformation is cleared up, and a lot of these things are dealt with. And then at the end, which is months, I can't remember if it was 6 or 9 months, something like that. And then other things that come up are like the Pope. At the time, I was a little. The Pope was sort of something, but the thing about the Pope is we have good popes and we have bad popes over hundreds and thousands of years. It is what it is, and it really doesn't affect the faith of the individual. It's really between you and God, and the current Pope at any given time is really not the issue. But also there's a lot of misinformation in that area as well. Protestant mindset, we overcame that. So anyway, at the end of this 9 months, I became a finally I went to confession. That was a big deal. That was a big deal because I grew up in a liberal state where, like, you don't even think about where I was growing up. You know, I was growing up like a wild. I was literally growing up like a wild person. I grew up kind of in the woods, literally, and with no restraints, no religion or anything. So I was a little on the wild side, and so I had a lot of sin. Right? I grew up in a. I'll leave it at that. Okay, I had grown up with that, not many restraints. And so I'm going to confession, and it was a big deal because all of a sudden I do this, examination of conscience. I was in there in the preacher's office talking to him for probably an hour and a half, it seems like, confessing, and it was emotional. I had done some things that I regretted, and when I left that office, I mean, wow, I felt like a different person. It was something I was angry. When I went in there, I was angry that I even had to do that because I thought, well, I just confessed to God like I'm told in the Christian church. But actually, that's not exactly that's not how Jesus set it up in the New Testament. So he set it up with the Pope, and he set it up with the apostles, and whatever sins you forgive are forgiven, whatever sins you don't forgive are not forgiven. So he set it up that way. So I went to it, and I went out. I tell you, I felt like I was 50 pounds lighter, or maybe 100 pounds lighter, when I came out of that confession, and it was a wonderful thing, and I've gone many times since then. So then we were remarried. Not only did I become a Catholic, but they didn't actually recognize my marriage, so I was remarried in the Catholic Church. And since then, this has been years now, and the more and more and more I learn about the Catholic Church, the better it gets. The more you learn about it, in my experience, it's just gets better and better and deeper. The history of the church going all the way back to the apostles and Jesus himself, all the saints, the lessons we can learn from them and their lives. And there's so much history involved in the church, and there's so much we can learn from it. So that's kind of my experience of that's how a thriller writer and a Protestant professor and thriller writer, how I ended up becoming a Catholic. Basically, I'm just your typical average Catholic. But that's it. That's my story. Thanks for watching. God bless you, and good night from the Midnight Bible Study.